Okay, we'll come out of recess. It's a little after 1. I want to welcome everyone here, everyone back for the Cuyahoga County Council work session. We're going to start session 4 on the Public Safety and Justice Services. We're going to open with the courts, finish the courts, and move a little bit into Public Works. Do we have anyone who's signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one has signed in.
Okay, I'm going to not wear a jacket today, so don't confuse me for Jim Jordan. This isn't a Benghazi trial. So, or Benghazi hearing. All right, so we'll go ahead and there's $1 involved in that response. So we'll open up with Judge Russo. So, Judge, please come forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I first wanted to thank you for allowing us the opportunity to be here. God bless you. And I first wanted to speak just briefly as the administrative or as a presiding judge and give you a little bit of understanding of where we as a court believe we are today with the budgets that are being placed and put before you. As the presiding judge, I will tell you this, the judges behind me all stand, if I ask them to come up, would stand in unison with me on the following comments. Those comments would be that pursuant to the revised code section under 307.01, we are to provide counsel what we believe to be reasonably necessary budget for our operations. Now, according to that revised code, it's supposed to be annually, but because of our makeup of government here, it's biannual. So we do provide that, and we provide that with the understanding that it's a reasonable, necessary dollar amount that we're asking you to fund us for the operations so that we can continue access to justice for those here in Cuyahoga County and those that come into Cuyahoga County with lawsuits. We stand together, all of us judges, in that understanding. What we have found hard to conceptualize and to accept is a couple of things. We've been asked by the county executive for budget cuts. And none of us believe that we have been given an opportunity to understand, is there a true financial budget crisis here in Cuyahoga County of why we should be giving 10% cuts of our budgets and the access to justice. We polled those court administrators around the state of Ohio who have told us nobody except one other county has budget cuts, and it's a budget cut that's for the county and didn't affect the courts. So we are still trying to understand what the crisis is here in Cuyahoga County. And we will say to you that when there was a crisis, we stood with you as a county, as we should during a crisis, and cooperated with budget cuts. It's at this time that we'll say to you that as my fellow judges, administrative judges come and speak to you, we are asking to be fully funded. We do not anticipate, we put a 10% cut in almost by the pulling of our teeth with the executive's office. A lot of what was cut and proposed were proposals made by the county executive's office when we said that we were not going to participate in a 10% cut. We were given ideas of how we should cut our budget to make the 10% cut so that all of us would be on the same page. And so we did. In those discussions with the county executive's office, we gave it 10%. I will say today that all of us will ask to be fully funded, not less than 10%. And even 2 of our courts will stand here and tell you reasons why they should receive some additional funding. And I'll allow those courts to speak on their own behalf. So we stand here before you united as a court with the request that you find outright that our budget request be approved, and you allow us the opportunity to tell you why. As the administrative judge for the Court of Common Pleas, I will address two issues and then see if I can answer any questions that you may have. With respect to questions that were asked by County Council, I know that OBM answered a number of those questions, and I just wanted to add just a few things. So the first question was to clarify the use of computer funds and the use of that special revenue fund. There is some suggestion by OBM that that dollar amount is $390,000, and we would dispute that that's an accurate number. We believe it's less than that. But the details of that adjustment, I want to say to you that if that adjustment does get taken out of our budget, then we want to be able to sit with the county government to discuss how that should be finalized. Those monies cannot be pulled back into a general fund. We, by law, are under guidelines of how that money is to be spent. So we would have to have some discussions about how the computerization fund would be used, if it is used, for the appropriate dollar amount to reduce whatever expense it is that we're looking at. The union agreement with brass, we do believe, as well with the OBM response, that those union agreements are in the 2016-2017 budget. With request to the assigned counsel fees, there'll be some discussion that I'll address specifically about the assigned counsel fees, but those increase in assigned counsel fees were something that were appropriated in the last budget. Since then, the criminal filings have gone down over the last 2 years significantly. I believe it's the goal of our county prosecutor to fall below 10,000 in indictments. There was a concerted effort on his part not to indict capital murder cases. But this year, with the rise in murders in Cuyahoga County, we anticipate those dollar amounts to be paid next year to be higher than where we are now with assigned counsel fees. And then finally, I know that last time I was only an observer, but I believe Councilman Miller and Councilman Gallagher were very active with the assigned counsel fees and trying to raise them to the appropriate levels for the lawyers who are giving their services. And I know there was an anticipation that there would be two increases, one that was given at the last budget, and that there would be a second increase to bring them up to the total dollar amount that we believed was acceptable. So I believe some of the fund that is there in the assigned counsel could be used for that as well. And then finally, with respect to our vacancies, when we get a chance to look at our vacancies, when you go back to our FTEs in the beginning of the first cycle for the budget, our FTE count for 2012 was 461, 2013 was 458, 2014 was 464, and 2015's estimate to be 458. So we believe we've been pretty consistent with our FTEs as well. What I would like to address before I take questions would be specifically, we've given you a budget reduction of 10%, but I want to tell you how it negatively impacts the court if those monies are used as a 10% reduction. As I noted on the increased or assigned counsel fees being turned over, originally we gave a $1.9 million deficit or $1.9 million to be given back in this 10%. The executive moved that to the full $2.4 million. How we see that as a negative impact, it restricts those fee increases that I believe would be a part of what we would do this year in our budget increase, that we would increase the fees to the appropriate dollar amount for assigned counsel. It restricts jury fee increases. And so what we were looking at is a jury fee. We had reduced the jury fees down to $20, and we're looking to at least bring them back to where it was before we reduced them at $25. And what negatively impacts our jury is if we just take a moment and think, the jury comes to us, not as a willing person. They get subpoenaed, they get asked to come down, and we have an opportunity then to have them as a participant. The price of parking is increased and will continue to increase. And now we're asking our jurors to come down and serve our voters who come down and are in our court every day. They can't afford to park for $20. they can't afford to come down and have that dollar amount suffice for parking and for lunch. And so we believe that this assigned counsel fee, which is specifically to be used for assigned counsel, jury fees, and subpoena fees, by us turning that over completely to county government for this reduction will negatively impact those specific items. The special project fund that you see, the $1.1 million, it is a one-time expense adjustment out of our special project fund. That special project fund, as I indicated to you, it is for specific dollar amounts that we are allowed to use that money. So it's not like we can write a check and turn it over to county government and say, here's $1.1 million. So it has to be earmarked specifically for items. And so we would have to need some flexibility to do that. But what it limits is, Councilman Gallagher, I'll just use you again. You've been an advocate of us improving our jury room and the jury room renovations in order to accommodate the jurors with security and with seating and charging on their phones instead of the outlets that we've brought in with extension cords that you're using. That special project fund would cause us not to be able to increase the use of the jury renovation room. We also use that as an emergency basis for catastrophic events. Some of the things that will have to be put on hold as well are the issue with the downtown parking and the jury room renovation. So we believe that negatively impacts the court. We would ask you to fund us that dollar amount or allow us to keep that dollar amount as opposed to turning that over. The computerization fund, again, the $1.1 million is a one-time expense. It would exhaust that dollar amount. And at that point in time, some of the things that we use that computerization fund are both for the clerk of courts and ourselves. Those dollar amounts of $150,000 that are already allocated to the ProWare contract, the agreement of the increase that we just authorized of $10, or that additional $180,000 from the clerk's side of the equation would be towards the ProWare contract. But we also, in 2011, for example, we purchased computers, not out of the general fund, so there was no general fund money used at all for the clerk of courts and for our court and the upgrading of computers. We spent $1.3 million out of the computerization fund. It's just starting to generate enough revenue that we're back up almost to the $1 million again. We're at a point where we believe, in speaking with Jeff Mowry before he left, that we need to upgrade our computers, and to do so would come out of the computerization fund. If we take the computerization fund and use it, we're going to ask you for those funds to pay for the upgrade for the clerk of courts and for the common pleas court. Again, reasonable expenses that we think we have. So, that being said, there are some vacancies that we put in as well. Some of those vacancies we believe would hurt or challenge the nature of what we do as an access to justice court. And so those are matters that I wanted to address with you. I'm asking you that in looking at our budget, that you allow us to keep our special project fund and our computerization fund as they are, and that the assigned counsel fee, that the excess money continue to be used in a positive way for the things that it was there for. We anticipate that the murder rate that we've experienced in Cuyahoga County is going to cause those fee bills to go up next year. All I would say is this: regardless of that fund having money in it, if the money's gone, there's still an obligation for the county to pay for that if we go over that dollar amount. So I would leave it at that. But if I could answer any questions, I am asking you to please, in looking at the budget for the Common Pleas Court, to fund us fully without any of the 10% cuts that are noted.
Okay, thank you. Before I open up for questions, let me just see if I understand. So what is the budget amount you're asking for? Restoration to what number? Is it the 15 original budget, the 49?
What is it? 3.7. Yeah, so I guess to answer that question, Councilman, is that the 3.7 million be not reduced from our budget that was submitted.
Okay, okay. We'll get the details, the exact number.
Do you have that?
So you're saying that the budget, so the budget number we have for the Court of Common Pleas alone is 48,215,000 and change, and then it's reduced again in 17 to 47,715. Are you saying that these numbers you have not agreed to? You've not agreed to the reductions?
I'm asking you as counsel, we submitted a 10%, and we were told that every agency was submitting a 10%, whether it was creative accounting or not, but we adhered to the 10% when submitting it, but would ask that those numbers not be reduced in our budget.
This is what we got. No, we prepared. Council prepared. Yeah.
Do you have those numbers?
Okay, I'm just trying to understand, we're kind of put in a position here, we were somewhat under the impression that the budget we received was all the agencies had signed off on whatever the cuts were, and that if we got requests for additional items, it was due to special circumstances or requests. But you're saying, and I'm gathering by your opening statement, we're going to hear from the other courts as well, that the budgets that have been presented to council for consideration are not budgets that you agreed to.
Correct.
Okay, all right, I'll open up for questions. Anyone? Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chairman, Judge Russo, thank you very much for your testimony. And could you explain what the source of revenue, if any, for the special project fund is? Where does it come from? Where does that money come from?
Jim, you want to speak to that? Jim Ginley, our Chief Financial Officer.
The Special Project Fund 2, we have two special projects. One is the foreclosure filing fee, and the other Special Project 2 that we're referencing as the offset is a collection of, I believe, a $50 charge, Greg, on civil and criminal filings when they're filed in the clerk's office. It's generating now probably about $50,000 a month, and it's decreasing because of filings going down, and that's the revenue source.
And Mr. Chairman, Judge Russo, am I correct that even if we tap the special project fund one time and the computerization fund one time, that this would pretty much exhaust those funds, and it would not create an ongoing reduction in your expenses? It's just a one-time reallocation. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it would be a one-time reallocation. It is not something that we anticipate for the future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? No other questions for the court? Mr. Gallagher?
Welcome, Judge.
Thank you.
I was working on two different things. Yeah, I do have a concern with the funds that we allocated for the attorney fees. The clerk was here earlier, and the contract with ProWare, would you have any problem with that contract being moved if it was agreeable with the administration and the clerk, which she indicated she was okay to move it to your budget and you take care of that, get her out of the loop? Because I see that as a bone of contention. The more I sit here, 5 years we've been here, it's always a problem. It's always a problem. And you guys are happy with it. I'm not. You're the users. I think it is what it is. But to move that out of the clerk's office, off of her books and onto your books, and you have that computer fund that they're saying is 3,900, and I thought somewhere else I had 390,000. I thought I saw 380,000, but it should be well north of $700,000 if everything that we're getting dollar-wise here is correct, which should be placed towards from your budget into the ProWare yearly contract, which then we would obviously have to make up whatever the lion's share that isn't taken care of out of that fund.
So we do not have any objection. It was really a suggestion we made initially that the ProWare contract come over to the court. We tried to do some research on why it was in the clerk's budget anyways. Those that work for me came in the year 2000. Tom Arnott, our IT program IT manager, and he doesn't recall why, but he was there a little bit after ProWare came over. So we're not even sure why it ended up over on the clerk of court side. So we don't have that answer, but we have no objection. Here's what I would say, Councilman, for all of you. If you think about the ProWare contract, there's a lot being said that sometimes it's just the court's IT. Here's who benefits from the ProWare contract and uses it. The sheriffs, the clerk, the two of them together make up 50% of the contract. So the executive office with those two departments make up 50% of the ProWare contract. The remaining is with the court, us, the probate court, domestic relations, court of appeals. That contract then services them as well. So the total contract affects court of appeals, domestic relations, common police court, clerk of courts, and the sheriff's department. That's everybody who benefits from the contract. We have no problem if the contract came over into our budget line. If you're asking us then to use the full computerization fund to pay a portion of whatever it is to pay each year on that contract, I'm sure we'll have discussions, but then all I'd say is I went to look back at expenditures since 2011 from the computerization fund. So that year in 2011, we spent almost $4 million on computers. In 2012, we spent a lower dollar amount, about $213,000. The 150 of that was the clerk of courts, because that's written into the contract, 150. The remaining were small dollar amounts for licensing fees, from a software house that we have to pay. So there are dollar amounts each year. I'll just go to the next two. 2013, we paid $423,000 out of that account. I apologize, that's 2013. 2014 is almost $300,000. So all I would say to council is if you want the computerization fund, that dollar amount to pay for or be a dollar amount on ProWare's contract, these dollar amounts were expended out of that fund, and we would be asking the general fund to pay for those. And again, we can give specifics, but they're licensing fees. Some of it is additional work for ProWare, like we did with TIFF to PDF. The Hewlett Packard, licensing fees. So there's specific dollar amounts every year that get paid, and it's averaging about $300,000 that come out of the computerization fund.
It would seem to be a smoother way to go. And you're going to come back to us anyhow for any IT that you're going to need.
Understood. And
Within
again,
reason.
we made that suggestion first, and
I know you did.
And I don't think Councilman Gallagher, when we met with the clerk, she's still, the clerk is still a signer on the contract. So nobody gets, as it sits right now with this negotiation going on right now, we're at the table, clerk's at the table, the county's at the table, and everybody has had an opportunity to dialogue with that contract, everybody. And any red line, any changes have been shared with all parties.
Right. And speaking of the contract, and I know it's in legal right now.
Yes.
And many of the gains, if there were gains from the previous clerk, are seemingly redlined out. I've asked for a copy, not through you, but through our law department. I haven't received it yet. So I just want to let you know, I got eyes on this thing. I'm going to watch it like a hawk, like I watched the last one. Mm-hmm. And y'all didn't like it, but I saved you by telling you what was in it, even though y'all thought you knew what was in it. So I'm just telling you, I'm going to watch that like a hawk again.
I wouldn't expect anything less, Councilman.
But the concern is allowing the clerk to be the clerk, and it was brought up earlier today. And I wanted to get numbers on case filings and the adjudicated cases. Clerk couldn't provide those with me until she notified ProWare.
Well, so I understand that was addressed, and this is what I would say to all of you. In looking at the information that she provided you, well, first of all, I think she turned it around in 24 hours. There's two ways she could have gotten it. She could have went to CGIS, which is our application. So she could have gone on her own and pulled it from CGIS. And she could have went to the program vendor, who is ProWare, and asked for it as well. So I believe she asked ProWare to give the case filings, but I was able to pull it off on CGIS today. And the numbers they're a little different, maybe by 10 to 15 cases, but the same number. So we do have it, for all of you to understand, our application is CGIS. You could pull it off of there, or you can go to ProWare. But ProWare works in the Justice Center. So we have 2 staff members for ProWare right there. And the clerk and I work hand in hand. We have a great relationship since she's been appointed to the position. And we have a list of what we're working on, what has priority that we have ProWare working on for us as part of the contract. So I apologize if I went longer, but
No.
there's 2 ways to get it.
Okay, well, my point being, we called Lake County and got it right away. So that raised a red flag for me. And I'm only telling you what she told me.
Yeah, and I would say if you had called, and I'm not saying you didn't for any reason, but if you had called me, Mr. Arnott, I texted him this morning coming in and told him, can you pull these numbers for me? And he had sent them to me in an hour and 15 minutes, which he pulled off of CGIS.
Well, on that, what I'd like to do, and of course the administration has to be on part, and everybody has to be on board. And if we could do that, I think that would move a lot of the problems that we may have with that contract off the table and get us back to paying the bills in which they have to be paid without worrying about whose fund it comes out of and if there's a tug of war as to where the dollars are coming for. If we know those dollars are coming out of your computerization fund at the beginning of the year when it's due and the balance comes out of the general fund, then that's fine. I think that's a cleaner way to do it. That's all I'm saying. I think it cleans it up, but there are further discussions that have to take place. But that's what I would ask my colleagues to back me up on that. It's regarding the jurors, and I think this is something we haven't looked at, and I don't know why we haven't looked at it. Is in considering we control our own parking, and parking's going to be going up as part of this. If you're a juror, you should be granted free parking. We should be able to waive that. We waive it here. We should be able to waive it there. They're doing a job. You're just showing up to a committee meeting, which obviously is a job, but it isn't a full-day job where you're pulled out of your regular job and your life is disrupted. So you're right. To charge these people to park is just ridiculous. And the people that I talk to, and where I'm from, there's not much bus access. So they're stuck with a $20 bill at the end of the day. So I'm going to try and submit that and see where we can go with that with the administration. I don't think it's a budget buster, but I think it's just something we need to look at. But that was going to be my request at the end. So, but depending on the dollars, and we'll get together with you on the amount of jurors that are here and what we're looking at. It's something we need to look at.
And whether there's a certain area too, because there's 150 jurors coming in on Monday and 150 coming in on Wednesday. So at one point we have 300 jurors down that need parking, and then they cross over, then we'll let some go if we don't need them. And then the next Monday, the same thing happens again, Monday and Wednesdays. In order to rotate those jurors, has saved us money over time because we can let some of the jurors that are Monday jurors leave early and while we have our jurors for Wednesday. But we're talking about approximately 300 jurors that come down every week.
The next thing are the electronic bracelets, the program that the clerk or the sheriff put together.
Yes.
I know you're working on that.
Yes.
And the goal is to get each judge to have 10 or a total of 340. I think today's testimony was 160 or 180 are actually on it. The savings to the sheriff is 340 to 360 a year, which is substantial. So we need you to use your influence with your fellow judges that this is something we're going to expect. And if in budgetary maneuverings here, we may just bump you next year on the budget if there's no movement here and charge you back. If we have to force the hand, we're looking to save money, and maybe there even is there's something we can do with the sheriff if he's saving money on his end. Maybe move that over to you and your computer contract or something on that 340 or 360. We can be a little interesting with the way in which we treat these things. There's got to be an incentive, but the incentive right now for the court is we can save money. We need your help, and we're going to be watching that closely. We appreciate what's happened so far, and the judges that have participated, the others have to get on board. Things change. It's a different world.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think my bench is on board. There's been discussions continuously. We just had a judges meeting last Wednesday. We did a live GPS demonstration. One of our employees took a GPS home on her ankle for the night. She also put on a TAD one, which measures alcohol intake. And she drank a glass of wine at night and brought in and then breached the surrounding areas while we were in our judges meeting. We were able to see it on the Mondo pad to see how it works. So a number of our judges were able to actually see the process and how the sheriff is responding. I would say this, we put it in place and we're at 160 and 170 right now. So my judges are fully committed. Obviously the concern that some have is what's the discretion we should have with what level of felony and how will that person react. We've had 7 or 8 instances of those being cut off, and some of those are concerns about who's wearing them and who's not. But Councilman, and for all of you here, that is a goal of ours with the court as well, that we move this project and continue because of the savings, but also because it gives us a sense of security, understanding that when we do put them out on the bracelet, they truly are being watched.
Now, probably one of the bigger things on the table now are the filing fees going down as dramatically as they are. Not necessarily so much on the criminal side, although incrementally it is going down dramatically on the civil side. Historically, and I said this earlier, Cuyahoga County had seats on the bench based on population until population went down. Then they changed it basically, and there was no written rule on this, was the court filings. I don't know where we are in justifying keeping as many seats that we have right now. 4 years is certainly a trend, and then I have the prosecutor saying that he's not going to be moving the lower level. He's going to go after the big boys. So I would assume that the criminal filings are going to continue that slow downward spiral. I would imagine what we're looking over a 4-year period, that absolutely the civil docket is going to be seeing that downward tick. I know the asbestos, I don't know what's left on the asbestos docket, but that should be almost done, and those are visiting judges anyhow. And then we had the foreclosure, which are ticking down after the big blast. This is you were asking about crisis. To me, this is crisis. How can we justify keeping the court looking the way it's looking with the budget that it has when these numbers, which this is the fuel that drives the court? How can we keep going the way we're going? And I know this is a Columbus issue, but again, historically, is when we needed judges, it was the Cuyahoga County judges that got in the car and went down to Columbus and brought those back home. How does the reverse happen here?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you're the question specifically. Here's what I would say about my court. We have specialty dockets. We have now 5 mental health courts. We have 2 drug courts. We have 1 reentry court. We have 1 veterans court. Those courts are labor driven with workers. Our probation department continues to meet or exceed the state standards. We continue to receive funding from the state because of how efficient we are as a court. Responsibilities, here's what I would say as a judge. I spend more time with my litigants and helping to get a case resolved as opposed to rushing them to judgment or motion practice, because I have the ability and time to do so now. So I believe I have the ability to be a judge in a much more efficient manner in resolving cases because filings are down. Now, all I would say, Councilman, is the issue that I think I hear you saying is, what do we do with the number of judges on our bench? That's a state legislature. So you go to the state legislature, they reduce the number of judges that they see fit. I know that our Supreme Court Justice our Chief Justice, Maureen O'Connor, is going to commission a study. And I know this because I sit on the Ohio Judicial Conference on the executive committee. And they're going to commission an outside agency to come into Ohio to look at the number of judges, whether it should be increased or decreased throughout the state of Ohio. And that study was just recently done in Michigan, and they determined that 360 judgeships should be terminated, but they are terminated over the course of attrition. So when somebody left the bench, then there wasn't nobody lost their job is what I'm saying. So I know there's this concern for some counties that it should be increased and for some that it should be decreased. I know our Chief Justice is looking at it. It might be that I ask her to come and speak to council, that she might be able to or send somebody to come speak about that. But I know that she's going to commission an outside agency to come in and look at that to make that determination. But for example, Michigan's 360 terminated judgeships are going to happen over the course of 15 years.
And I would anticipate that would be the plan up here, but state legislatures don't get in their cars and come up here to add judges. Judges get in their cars and go down to the state legislature to get judicial spots. The opposite should be true, and the court should be with the Chief Justice in moving this along. The work can't possibly, and I know it's a little bit more intricate now, but when you lose 30% of your civil cases, I don't care what kind of argument you have, it fails. It fails that you don't have enough people, or you should keep your workforce at the level in which it is. I mean, it just, I don't know how, I don't understand that argument. I really don't.
So I would say this to council. I'd venture to say, do you know how many cases we have active on our docket at any given time? 34 judges have, when we average our dockets, 450 active cases at any given time. And that number remains about the same throughout the year. So the number of cases we lose because of handling a criminal case or civil case, the same amount is coming back on. So our numbers are pretty consistent, but we handle about an average of 100 to 150 criminal cases. Although with Prosecutor McGinty's mindset of how he's indicting, I don't know if there's less criminal activity or is it just the mindset of how the prosecutor wants to indict. But the numbers are going down. We know that from a 15 almost to, it's below 10,000 right now, may fall below 10,000 for this year. So we carry that many cases, both foreclosure, civil dockets, and then our criminal dockets as well.
Well, the adjudicated cases are certainly going down.
Yes.
We had the same concern when we came on with the Board of Revision. And what we did was we put panels on, got rid of the backlog, and that was it. Got rid of the panels. All I'm saying is this needs to be looked at. The justification of a 10% cut, in my opinion, on these numbers, maybe not the way in which it was done, but on personnel, and I hate to say that, I was a personnel at one time. It's not easy for me to say, but my job here is to make sure that the dollars are watched on the taxpayer's side. And again, historically, when the courts saw that tick go up, and it wasn't a 4-year, it could be a year, and they were down there looking for more seats. You know it, I know it, you know it. The opposite isn't true, and that's all I'm saying is justice is balanced. There's no balance here. And I don't blame you, but I'm asking you for help with the Chief Justice to get this program moving, because we don't have the population up here. The numbers are clearly going down. And I honestly don't even want to hear an argument of things are a little bit more intricate in the courts. No, they're not. No, they're not. You know, there's different dockets and things like that. But you also had foreclosure. We brought people in for that. The asbestos docket, we brought people in to do that. I mean, so there's help over there. It's just, we have numbers that we're staring at, and it just doesn't, it just doesn't do you any good to argue that you need the personnel that you have. I really don't see it. Now, where we can agree, and I'm done in 1 second, please. Where we can agree, the way we can get to the bottom of this and really find out what the facts are, performance audit. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have some suggestions, not here, but it's going to happen. And either it's going to happen with the ballot of the people, or you're going to do it on your own, and we're going to help you figure out how to pay for it. In-house would be about $400,000, and the other courts are going to be told this too. I need to know what you're telling me is true. Maybe what you are telling me is absolutely factual, but the numbers are telling me it isn't, that it can't possibly be, but maybe it is. And the way in which we could get to the bottom of that is to have somebody independently come in here and review what's going on.
I don't know what you mean by what's going on, but so
No,
are you talking about the judges' dockets?
Our level of personnel, is that the level that we need? Is that the level we need? You're telling me yes. I'm telling you the numbers are screaming no. And the only way to find out the fact is
I would say that if you're doing it for you, let's do it for everybody in the county.
Oh,
I think eight members of your county council received over $90,000 in raises just recently. And the question would be and not you, but some of your staff, 8 people over $90,000 in raises. So if we're doing a performance review, let's do it, but let's do it for everybody.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Thank you.
Let's move on to Councilmember Simon.
You, Mr. Chair, I didn't want this to go on 11 hours like the Benghazi hearing, right?
Yes.
So,
Dollar.
Thank you.
Okay,
I mean, every time we say Benghazi, you get $1.
who's getting it?
You get one now.
Okay.
All right, sorry. What I heard you say was that right now, the current caseload of the judges, even though this really has no bearing on this discussion at this point in time, is consistently busy and nothing has changed dramatically to make any changes, at least with regard to the volume of your dockets. Is that?
That's correct.
And that you are having somebody come in and you're cooperating with the Supreme Court to come in and do an independent evaluation of this court as well as other courts in the whole state.
So Councilman Simon, I always say that the chief appointed me initially to be the person, the face of this evaluation in Ohio. And then I started to get a lot of negative comments because I'm a judge and I'm trying to eliminate judgeships or look at judgeships. And she said, you know what, John, why don't the Supreme Court just handle it? And so that's when she took it from me meaning the Ohio Judicial Conference committee that I sat on. I sit on the Court Administration Committee. So originally I was the face, but then I said to her, maybe I don't want to be the face for Ohio on reduction of
So
judges.
this is an audit, right?
It'll be a complete, I think the National Center for State Courts is the one who did it in Michigan. So I think that's who she is looking to possibly bring in for the state of Ohio.
So can you tell us what,
And I'll get the answer, Councilman Gallagher. I'll call her and see where that is so I can report back.
can you reiterate what cuts there would be to the Court of Counsel does not restore the 10%?
So what we end up having concerns with for the court, as I noted, so I'll go back to some of those. So I think with the assigned counsel, again, there was a discussion about Councilman Miller. We gave that first raise, but we didn't give the second. So right now, our assigned counsel is lower than what would have been the national norm. That money that was sitting in assigned counsel, we were anticipating that this budget, we were told to wait till the next budget, would increase to the level that they should be at based on the numbers that were provided.
The numbers, Judge, I'm sorry, that council passed legislation last budget cycle to
Correct.
increase those fees to make them commensurate with at least a reasonable standard. And now these potential cuts are going to undermine that?
Yeah, it would make it stale. So it would make it, the current numbers that we're at will stay at. But I think Councilman Gallagher or Councilman Miller ran that subcommittee. Those numbers were provided. Council voted to increase them, but not the full dollar amount. They wanted to wait and see what the fund would have. And then we were going to increase if it was there. So it will downplay the dollar amount that our assigned counsel should get for a reasonable dollar amount. And then we get into the jury fee increase that I had mentioned as well. It limits some of the renovations that we're able to do, catastrophic events to have money on hold. It's going to restrict some of our staffing needs and positions, programming, statistical programmer that we wanted to bring in, some probation officers that we're not going to be able to bring in, technology purchases as well. And then that money would have to come out of the general fund as well.
So thank you. And with regard to, I'm going to switch gears to the computerization fund, and if at some point you get the ProWare contract in your budget line,
Yes.
is that fund sufficient to cover all those expenses, or do you have other needs for the computerization fund other than this potential ProWare expense?
Yeah, so when we went back and looked, you would say that there would be an additional average of dollar amounts that we paid out of the fund that average about $350,000 a year. And those are all different types of line expenditures we could provide. But those dollar amounts we would be asking, as Councilman Gallagher said, we would ask that you fund us those in a general budget, general fund.
Yes.
In addition to the dollar amount that the computerization fund does not cover the ProWare contract, whatever that dollar amount is.
Would you say, or could you say, that this 10% cut could impact the suspension of justice or the operation of your justice.
I think the judges behind myself, or the four of us, we've had continual discussions about access to justice being hindered by this reduction for all of us.
Any questions? Okay. I'm just going to kind of recap.
Okay, thank you.
No, I'm not going to go into the details that my colleagues went into, but so what you're saying is the budget that is before us. Thank you. You and the other judges can respond as well, but I'm assuming you don't speak for them, but you have their consensus. The budgets that are before us have not been approved by the four courts.
That's correct.
Okay.
To answer your question, so we would ask to be funded in 2016 at the dollar amount of $51.9 million, and in 2017, $51.4 million.
Did our staff get that? Okay. And that's your court.
Yes.
All right. We know that words have meaning, and if I'm interpreting your opening statement regarding quoting ORC code section, that if the budget's not restored, is it the court's intent to seek its legal ORC mandated or opportunity to seek funding?
I will say at this time that the judges, the administrative judges, have not or do not believe that's the route we would take. We would hope we would have opportunity. It's obviously an option that we have as a court, but we think there's easier and better ways to work with counsel.
No, and I would hope so, but
Yes.
I believe by you stating it, you were more or less putting us on notice, that you making us aware of the fact that you have that remedy.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Just a question to the administration. Were you, when this budget was submitted, were we aware that the courts were not in alignment with the budget that was being presented?
Mr. Chairman, for all four courts, the budgets that are submitted were submitted in consultation with those courts. I don't think any agency or entity is happy to make a reduction, but that is not the same thing as to say that there wasn't consultation and an agreement made.
So an agreement made meaning that they were, although not happy, but satisfied and could operate with the budget that was submitted to council?
The budget reflects the court's wishes as to how they wish for us to do this, with the caveat that they did not want to do the 10% to begin with.
Okay, so the onus then falls on us to. All right, well, I mean, is it based on what you're hearing today? Is it the administration's position to present a revised budget, to submit amendments to the budget for the courts? I know there are other amendments coming as a result of what we're hearing, things that were previously not included or amended or omitted from the budget. So we're expecting amendments. Is this something the administration is going to bring forward, or is this something the council is going to need to take on up in its deliberation?
Mr. Chairman, I've been in this room to hear this testimony as you have. I've not been in direct consultation with the executive.
Okay.
I will say that the budget proposals in general for the courts are not a mistake. They were not an error or a misplaced line item. Okay. These budgets reflect the conversations we had with each of the courts, and the position represented today is in conflict with the understanding we had.
So is it? I know you can't answer for the executive, but is it to the best of your knowledge, is it the executive's position that the budget submitted for the courts is the budget that we should be making our decisions from, that no anticipated adjustments are coming?
I don't suspect that the executive would be recommending wholesale changes to the court's budgets.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, I'll just say that the county executive knows that we're going to be here today asking for our funds to be put back in our budget. So it's not something they're not aware of, because I've had conversation with their office. it was pulling teeth
Okay.
to get to where we are today.
Okay, Judge, the only thing I would ask, two things, as we ask everybody, your opening statements, if you would give a copy to the clerk, so we just record it in the record. And the other, get those numbers back to Mr. McAleer, so we know
Okay.
exactly what numbers you're requesting.
All right, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Judge, there is one more question.
Real quickly, and strap in, central booking.
Yes.
Sounds like a good idea. It seems we have some ideals on the prosecutor's side, some thoughts on your side, and there's been general discussion, how do we get this thing done? And I talked to you, and I thought we need that one person or somebody in the middle of this that's going to take control of this. If we found some person or some organization that would come in here and run that, would that get this thing done? Because I come from the interest of saving money, time, and again, providing swift justice for those that need it. Is that a solution?
I know that our Director of Law has taken some interest in the JSR and the goals of the JSR. There have been discussions individually with the Director and the County Executive about where the justice system reform should move and how it should move. And those discussions were had individually with all of us. I believe in my conversations with the prosecutor this morning, he and I had a chance to speak, that we understand that some of the drive of JSR may be led by Mr. Triazzi, and that we may all be together. I think November 4th is our next meeting with justice system reform, and we're all trying to get to a point where we are on the same page with how we want to move forward and have everybody involved. So we're there now, at least having those discussions. And I've expressed it, one of the biggest things I think we need to do is include the whole county. We have excluded the municipal courts, and they are integral to us moving forward. And I've said that again and again. And the gentleman to my right reached out and now has Judge KJ Montgomery actively involved. And I'm seeing emails as much as yesterday with those discussions about centralized bond commissioners setting bonds for the county, assigned counsel, public defenders, and all those things I think it needs to happen outward in. I think the centralized booking is a good idea, and I think we started in and started to force it out. And so my idea was we really need to encompass the county and work inward, so then we can say everybody had a chance to be involved. And I think those municipal court judges and their clerks and their police were on the outside, and they were being told this and this and this and this, as opposed to including them and getting us to this focal point. Those discussions have all been had, and I think that's where the JSR is moving. So I'm hoping, to answer your question, that we don't need someone to come from outside. I think all of us see the benefits and cost savings of centralized booking, to have groups there to be able to determine mental health and to look at addictions and to be able to look at first-time offenders. And I think all that's important. So I feel confident, again, that Mr. Triazzi and as some of the discussions we've had recently.
How many meetings have there been, Mr. Triazzi?
We've had individual meetings with all the partners.
Okay, so we'll be brought in sometime down the line?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think at our next meeting is really the opportunity to say at the JSR meeting. But I think they got us on at least an understanding of where we want to and how we want to move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Judge.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next, Justice system reform. The next court before us is the juvenile court. Judge Sweeney. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Gentlemen. Judge, please proceed.
I'd like to thank you all for your time and attention, and I would like to thank my friend and colleague, Presiding Judge John Russo, for speaking for our courts today. Judge Russo spoke for all of the courts generally, but there is one area where I will speak on behalf of the juvenile court, and that is pursuant to Ordinance Section 701.04 to request funding for the classification and compensation study that was just completed by the National Center for State Courts last Thursday. This study was suggested by this council at the budget hearings in 2013 and was funded by the council in 2014. The results have been provided for your review. Additionally, this study was done as part of the collective bargaining agreements with Local 860 that went into effect in 2013. It is important to note, however, that this study covers not only our bargaining unit employees, but all juvenile court employees. The goal of this project one of the goals included proposing appropriate compensation schedules that reflect comparisons to the market and the local business environment based on an assessment of pay in the regional, state, and local external labor market, that data and analysis. The total cost of implementing the classification and compensation study is $2.8 million. It should be noted that a compensation study is a snapshot in time and becomes less accurate and often more expensive the greater the delay in implementation. We are asking for funding for implementation for January 1st of 2016. The primary takeaway of the study is that the court employees are underpaid relative to the market. And in certain critical positions, most notably those of detention officer and probation officer, this low pay is a significant challenge in our ability to attract and retain staff. Last year, when the violence in the detention center was at critical levels, you provided $250,000 to the court so we could hire an additional 12 detention officers. And again, I would like to thank you for working with the court to resolve the violence. Between April of 2014 and July of 2015, we reviewed 1,049 applications. We interviewed 182 candidates and hired 22 candidates. During that same period, 18 detention officers left the court. So as of Tuesday, we have 5 openings for detention officers. Using a Department of Labor formula provided to us by the National Center for State Courts, we calculated that the average cost to replace a detention officer is $40,172. The largest part of this total is covering open shifts with open overtime. So the cost of replacing the 18 detention officers who departed between April of 2014 and July of 2015 is $741,096. Please keep in mind that this is only the overtime cost for detention. In probation, we are able to attract staff, but we are unable to retain them. I am proud to say that we do an excellent job of training probation officers for other agencies. So well that probation and parole agencies are hiring our staff as soon as they have gained experience. Since January of 2014, we have lost 13 staff to the State of Ohio Parole Authority, the Ohio Department of Youth Services, the General Division of the Court of Common Pleas, and several municipal courts. We are also losing staff to private nonprofit agencies, which were once an area of recruitment for us. The other area of note that came out of this study, to which I must draw your attention, is that we have one position where the starting salary is below the 2015 4-person per household poverty level guideline of $24,250, and that is the position of process server. Additionally, we have 5 job classes with starting salaries below 120% of this same guideline: clerk, custodial worker, detention clerk, food service worker, and the process server. The federal poverty guideline for a 5-person household is $28,240. The court has 57 individuals making under this amount. While all do not have 5-person households, it is clear that the court has a significant number of employees who are working at or very close to this poverty level. These are hardworking employees without whom the court could not function, and they deserve better. When I'm in court, I want to be able to look the kids in front of me who are on my docket in the eye and tell them that if they stay in school, if they get a job and play by the rules, they'll be glad they did, and that they will be able to support their own families through their own efforts. It is hypocritical of me to say that in the courtroom when it is not true of too many of our employees in our own court. Again, I would like to thank you all for your time and attention, and I would like to thank Judge John Russo, all of my judicial colleagues, and all of our hardworking court staffs, and the Office of Budget and Management for all their efforts in this ongoing discussion. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll open up for questions. Before we do, what is the amount that your budget you're asking for restoration to?
The budget, we are asking you to retain our 2015 budget levels of math is not my strong point. $60 million, $60,000, $60,060,000, and $217.
Okay, and that would be for both years?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McAleer, you have that, okay. Questions from my colleagues? We'll go Mr. Miller, Conwell, Gallagher, Simon. Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, Judge, am I correct that you're asking us to restore all of the targeted budget reductions, and in addition to that, to add $2.89 million per year in order to fund the compensation study? Is that correct?
That's my ask, yes.
Okay. And in the targeted budget reductions, it includes shifting $445,000 to special revenue funds, and my question about that is that just a one-time thing that would deplete that fund, or does that fund have sustaining resources that it could fund that on an ongoing basis?
We've shifted Title IV funds over to cover next year to try and make those cuts that we were asked for. It would deplete it for 2017. I would say generally, if I could go back and answer two of the questions, or say two things about the question that Judge Russo was asked. We did try and meet what we were asked to do with this 10% reduction, with the understanding, let me just say this, juvenile court does not have any money. Domestic relations court has less money than we do. If you cut our budget, we identified the areas where it would hurt the least. All right? So it would hurt us less if you cut off our foot than if you cut off our arm. Does that make sense? And the cuts that you make, I'm going to tell you, domestic relations court, they are really broke. So if you do that, give them the money. But we need this compensation study too. I mean, there's a lot going on here at the court. You know, we are trying here. I don't think there's anybody in this room that is not trying to be using fiscal resources well. But it's a struggle. And our contract for 4E says the county agrees that any Title 4E money received pursuant to this subgrant agreement will not be treated as a countervailing income or resource pool. But that's what we're doing. And so we're doing that, but we're doing it in violation of this contract. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I have one other thing to say, and this is just a comment, because I know that you don't have the answer to it and I don't have the answer to it, but I think we all got to think about it, which is that I know that that the executive's budget as submitted contains $1 million just in 1 year for 2017 to deal with the issues of pay compression, which is similar to the salary compensation issues throughout all the executive agencies, which employs thousands of people. And you're asking us for $2.89 million per year on an ongoing basis just for one court system. And the question we have to struggle with is how do we balance that? Because the assumption about pay equity issues is that they exist throughout county government, and that we can't do them all at once, and the executive's $1 million is intended as the first step of a long-term program, which I think is the right thing to do. And the idea has been that it should be somewhat similar or the same for everybody. So we got to figure out how to deal with that, and it's a serious problem. And as I said, I don't know what the answer is, because I'm sure you did a good study, and I'm sure that the results are justified and needed. But the question is, how can we do it right away for one and not for the rest of them? So that's my comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Conwell.
Thank you, through the chair, to Judge Sweeney. Just a suggestion, or ask if it was ever thought to continue to, since you shedded light on retaining the training that you've been doing, possibly to retain some of the employees. Has it ever been thought, as we've been doing the training, and you've seen some kind of system that they're leaving in an 8-month period or whatever, that we could ask them to pay for their training up front, and if they don't leave in 2 years, or vice versa, we pay it up front, but they must reimburse at their last paycheck if they leave before. I'm just wondering if those kind of ideas were thought about.
I am not aware that they have been thought of, and we are currently in negotiations with Local 860 now. So I will certainly bring that to our attorney's attention and have him put that on the table.
Thank you.
Mr. Gallagher, then Ms. Simon.
Might slow down there, wanting to leave.
Okay.
I'd be remiss not to tell you that Ms. Lippman is quite an advocate, and as feisty as anyone we've had in this room, believe you me.
I'm going to take that as a compliment.
You ought to, because I want to leave when she comes in, I'll tell you. And that's a good thing, Karen. I don't know what you make, but you earn it. You can go to step 25. Here we find ourselves in a tough spot. We told you to do something and you did it. So, none of these budgets are easy.
Yeah, I feel that.
And, so we're this is our job. So we'll try and figure it out. I just want to tell you, I appreciate, I'm hard on some of the courts some of the time, but the whole purpose is to get down to what's fair and equitable for everybody. And we asked you to do something and you did it. So we're going to have serious discussions on what we can and can't do. But I can tell you, we're all here listening, and we see what you've done, and we've seen the movement, and we know the concerns, and we had the problems earlier last year, and we responded. So, I can tell you, at least for me, and I'm sure I speak for my colleagues, that we're going to do our best to do what we can.
Thank you very much. It is very much appreciated.
Thank you. Ms. Simon?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just tough. This is just obviously a tough budget cycle. And we appreciate this. And I'm assuming this will impact, or does impact, your court operations and effectiveness.
It does impact our court operations and effectiveness. We're dealing with kids, most of whom are poor. One of the things that we are trying to do to get to the budget that was submitted through the Office of Budgeted Management, frankly, is to raise court costs. And on a personal level, I'm kind of uncomfortable with that. because, these kids are not volunteering to come through the court. And I know they did stuff that brings them into the court system. But the fascinating thing about juvenile court is you see everything from soup to nuts. You've got serious violent crimes, and you've got things that are juvenile ridiculousness. But so sometimes I feel like when I assess court costs, because it's not the kid that's going to pay those court costs, it's the parent. I'm taking bread out of that little brother and sister. That's going to impact that whole family. And that's a real challenge. If we cut our residential, which is what we have proposed to do, then that means that we are going to be putting kids out on the street who may not deserve to be out on the street. But these are the kinds of conversations that we are having.
And Judge, if I may, it's not only the youth getting in trouble, it's the youth who need parenting plans, it's youth who are seeking child support. It's not just, it's
Right.
a whole range of those who need access to the court.
Yeah, it's important. I've been focusing on the delinquency docket, but, we have about 1,200 kids who are in foster care. Every kid who is in foster care has an open case with Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court. It impacts our ability to help those kids. We have several thousand paternity, private custody, support cases. When we cut staff, that means that there will be a delay in the support payments that are made to that family. And when you're operating at the poverty level, every single dollar counts. So it absolutely has a critical impact. Can I just say this? I had a conversation with my detention center superintendent yesterday about dental care for kids in the detention center. And we have 3 dental appointments scheduled next week. And we're saying to ourselves, when the doctor says this kid's got an abscessed tooth and it needs to be fixed, can we say, that's not our problem? That kid's tooth happened before it came into the detention center, so we're not going to fix it. Certainly that would be fiscally prudent. Can we do that? I don't know.
One more thing, Mr. Chair, and this Judge Sweeney, who's sped up the 4D caseload, and I don't know if you recall when we came in, there was a big gap between when child support was actually being established and also put into effect, and that you chaired up and led that effort to make sure that this is addressed, and it has been. So when we look at this, just be cognizant of that. We don't want to go backwards on that.
No, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Germana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Sweeney, you heard in the last presentation when we were talking about the caseload going down in civil cases. What's been the historical balance here with cases for juvenile court? Are you declining or is it increasing? I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from you.
So if someone wants to jump in, we're pretty steady. We are around 20,000 cases for this, divided among the 6 judges and the magistrates. So we're a little down. And I guess too, it would depend on how far back are you looking? Are we going back 5 years, 10 years? Are we going back to the 90s? So I would say in the last probably 5 or so years, we're pretty steady. Does anyone, yeah. We haven't had a significant impact of a decrease.
Decreasing.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, hearing none. Judge, thank you. If you could
Thank
just
you
leave
very
your
much.
opening remarks with the clerk.
Okay, thank you.
That'd be great. Thank you. Next up is Domestic Relations, Judge Palos. Judge, thank you. Yeah, we did. No.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. First of all, I absolutely have to thank my colleagues on the other three courts because individually and collectively, they have all offered to cover any 10% reduction this court would have to take. And I just think that you have to understand that doesn't mean that they can afford to do that. They just understand that we can't afford to take 10%. We're in a completely different position here. Even the executive has decided that we can't take 10%, so we haven't had our budget cut. But what has happened is that we're underfunded historically. I'll explain to you if you want to go into the details of it. Some of you who were here last time probably heard about it already. But we couldn't meet our budget last year without extra funds from Common Pleas Court. We can't meet our budget this year, and to cut 10% would be ridiculous. So the proposal now is 8.6, approximately almost 8.7 million. Even at that number, we're going to fall short if we change nothing. But I need to tell you that we need to change a lot of things. And I've handed you a packet. This is a similar packet to what we provided to the OBM. And I think they've listed some of these things, and it's listed in the executive's budget packet, but they're not explained to you. And I want to explain them to you. A couple things. Our mission at the Domestic Relations Court is to help families restructure their lives by reaching compassionate and just resolutions to their parenting and their property disputes. However, we are faced with challenges to do that. Those challenges are access to justice issues, which are significant. That involves a lot of poverty issues. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what poverty means in our court in a few minutes. It also involves families changing. And the families have significantly changed, the families that we're seeing. We have a huge language barrier. We are more and more seeing people who cannot speak English, and we have to have, by law, an interpreter. We are having cultural problems. People, again, who may be from another country, their rules about divorce, property division, spousal support, even about marriage are completely different. And these cases are contentious, and they involve money and businesses and children and dowries and things that we are not necessarily equipped to trace or find, but they are huge in our caseload. In addition, we have the socioeconomic problems, that is our eroding middle class and the poverty I alluded to. The fact that people are filing poverty affidavits in their cases, that they cannot meet even the simple filing fee to come into our court. It's an access to justice issue. They have to be allowed to come into the court. This is not pay to play. People have to be allowed access to the court. In addition, we've had an explosion of domestic violence cases. I put the graph in there for you. I didn't put the year before, which was about 200 in the 08-09, 230. 400 in the 400s and 10 and 11, in the 600s and 11 and or 12 and 13. We hit 1,114 last year. We're on track to hit about the same number this year. 90% of those filings are by self-represented individuals. 90%. To process through one of our domestic violence filings takes probably 3 to 4 hours. And you can say, well, can't you speed it up? Well, we have. It used to be 5 or 6 hours. When the clerk was across the street and people had to go back and forth 2 or 3 times, it took a lot longer. These are people coming in unrepresented. They don't understand the form. Some of them don't speak English. Some of them don't read. They have to be heard. They have to have someone helping them. Sometimes we have to call an interpreter. We are not allowed to do the work for them, so they have to write out their complaint, and then somebody has to sit down with them and fit it into the form, which, if any of you have seen it, it's 9 or 10 pages long. I've asked Councilman Simon to come and be a guinea pig and walk through the system and see what it's like to be the person coming in to get that domestic violence, and she's agreed to do that. And I would invite all of you to come along with her. and see what it's like to be that victim. 3 years ago, we had two people, a magistrate and a coordinator for domestic violence. That's a person who's a paralegal who is helping the pro ses. Through a grant, we've expanded, but also through our funding, we've had to expand. We now have 9 people. It's a department. We had to horse trade with the prosecutor's office to get space because these are safety issues. We had to put the magistrates in special offices that had 2 doors because our other magistrates don't have egress. So if they're in their room with somebody committing violence, which happens in these hearings, somebody can get explosive, they're trapped in there and the litigant's trapped in there. So we have 2 rooms that have 2 or 3 doors so that we have safety planning for those magistrates. We had to create a safe space for the petitioners who are coming into our court to file for their petition. And we also had to create that safe space for those petitioners while they're waiting in our court for their hearing, because out in the hall they were being threatened. So we had to horse trade with the prosecutor's office to get some space that has a waiting room, and that waiting room doubles as the place where the petitioners fill out their forms. I don't know if you know this, but they bring their kids because they come when they can come, when it's safe to come. And so we have a little playroom. We thought about trying to have daycare, but that costs about $300,000, and you need to have a separate special bathroom for children with lower toilets. And the capital improvements, we can't get a door for one of our domestic violence hearing rooms. It's been 4 years that we've been trying to get this door, so I thought getting a bathroom was probably not going to happen. So we skipped that. We don't have the daycare, but we have some toys, and we try to make sure the kids are safe while their parent or guardian is filling out the forms. But you have to understand that right now with 9 people, we're having trouble meeting the Supreme Court guidelines. We're getting these cases, but they are the lag on our docket. In addition, we have to help these people. We have to have these hearings. This is immediate. These are extraordinary relief. And if you pay attention, as I know you all do, to what's in the news, you see that almost every couple days there's somebody who's being killed or harmed very, very dramatically by a spouse, a relative, an ex-spouse, a lover, a parent of a child that they share together. And these cases are happening all the time, and we're trying to get ahead of them with these orders. Now, our orders are civil, they're a piece of paper, but we're trying to bring in, through our grant, we've partnered with a lot of people. We've partnered with the clerk's office, the sheriff's office, the Rape Crisis Center, the Domestic Violence Center, the Legal Aid Society. We've brought in the Child Support Enforcement Agency. We've brought in juvenile court. We're trying to work with everybody and that we can work with. We've brought in the police occasionally. We want to work more with the police. We want to make sure that our orders have meanings out there on the street. We want to help these people and make this system as flawless as it can be. It's very much improved from what it used to be. We've got a lot of shortcuts, and a lot of them are electronic. We've got a lot of good people. Right now with the grant, we have 2 advocates from the Domestic Violence and Child Advocacy Center on site, helping these people fill out their forms, helping them through the process, making sure they come back, because that's one of our issues with victims of domestic violence. They don't always come back. Something happens between that order and the full hearing, which is 7 or 10 days later. They're scared. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to expect. They're alone. They're unrepresented. So we have advocates. Now, that money is paid for by grant money. I don't think it's appropriate for the court to pay that money directly. But if that grant ever runs out, I'm going to be back here asking you to give us contract money so that we can have those advocates, because that's a huge piece of what we do. Right now, what we really lack for this system is security. We also lack, I see that we're going to need another magistrate and probably another scheduler in the next 2 years. So what I've asked in here is that we have an assistant to the case manager next year, that be budgeted. Our case manager runs the department. She does all of the lethality assessments. She does all of the grant reporting. She meets with pretty much every petitioner who comes in, and she also helps, she's a lawyer, and she helps negotiate consent agreements. And consent agreements are a win-win. You get somebody to either agree that they've committed domestic violence and to stay away, or in the cases that are less harsh, and sometimes there's just bad behavior during a divorce, you get in a consent agreement that somebody's going to move out of the house and they're going to stay away from each other, but they don't necessarily admit to ongoing, that there's been past series of domestic violence. So our case manager is helping the magistrates with those cases, getting that done. That's one person doing about 6 jobs. So I'm asking for an assistant for her next year. I'm thinking that in 2 years we're going to need another magistrate and another scheduler. So that's on here. E-filing. I know you want to talk to me about e-filing. We've been working on it. What you probably need to understand is Franklin County is the first domestic relations court, and you got to compare apples to apples, that has done e-filing. Their county spent 3 years before it started, and they've been doing it for 2 years. Their county spent $1.8 million just on the hardware and the contracts to get that e-filing going. They couldn't even tell me how many dollars in manpower they spent. They hired a woman with a PhD to run their program and another additional full-time employee to help with it. So I don't have a problem with e-filing. The problem is e-filing is a slippery slope. It goes to being paperless. E-filing helps the lawyers. That's great. There's two problems with that. One is 60 or 70% of our filings are self-represented. A lot of these people are in poverty. They don't have computers and they're not going to e-file. So we still need to do what we're doing. Number two, if we slide into being paperless, we have to have the workflow queues. We have to know where that paper goes when it gets into the court. And we've been doing that backwards, which I think is actually forward is the right way. We're building from the bottom up internally so that those work queues are there so that when we go to e-filing, we can go into being paperless within a year or two after that. I'm not saying that we're all going to be able to not print things. And one of the problems with e-filing is that anybody pretty much over 35 doesn't operate out of their iPad or their smartphone. They print that stuff out and they edit it on paper, and the court ends up spending money. So the clerk will save some money and the attorneys will save some steps in coming down to file, but we're going to end up printing. We're going to spend paper and ink. So it's not necessarily an early save. It's actually an early cost, but we're willing to do it. We actually have several attorneys lined up to do a test for us, but I had to stop it. I had to stop it when the executive said to me 2 or 3 months ago, you're going to have to cut your budget by 10%. I can't even tell you how ghastly that idea is. We can't even meet the budget this year and we're going to cut it with 10%. That'd be $1 million or $1.5 million down. That for us, almost all of our budget, if you understand, is people. And again, our people, getting to my next issue, well, actually skipping an issue, our people, like, for example, the schedulers. When we have a scheduler missing, we have a problem. Right now, in our family evaluation, and I've asked in here to have a third scheduler for our family evaluation next year, that to be budgeted. We have 2 schedulers. That person schedules for 8 people, 2 psychologists, 3 social workers, and 3 mediators. We have 2 people who do that. They also do transcription. They check in the people. They do a lot of other activities in the court. One of them's on FMLA for a month. So I have 1 person. We don't have another person in the court we can pull off of their work to go down there to help. So we have 1 person scheduling for 8 people now. That's why we need a third person. That's why we need some depth. Whoever let this court take the buyout in 2009 and reduce its staff from 111 to 62 did a crime to the people of this county, because we cannot keep the work up. It's a miracle that we have maintained the docket and we are in compliance with the Supreme Court guidelines, but this cannot happen. Thank God our staff isn't as underfunded as some of those people at juvenile court, but they're still underfunded. We asked 2 years ago and 3 years ago for money based on the last time that juvenile court had done one of those studies we have a lot of the same comparable kind of staff. So we can pull out different people off of their study and say, well, the study says this person is a scheduler, this person's a magistrate, this person's this, they should make this much money. So we looked at that and we came up with our own STEP program. And we asked it to be funded by the executive. And at that time, it was like $300,000. And we didn't get the money. So I'm sure by my calculations with these new numbers, it's more like $1 million now. You know, I know you can't think about funding their $2.8 million, but we've got a terrible situation here. And this is a terrible situation for the people of this county who are coming to our court, who don't have funds, who don't necessarily have computers, who sometimes can't read or speak English, and they're coming here and they're looking for justice. And we're not giving it to them because we don't have the time. We don't have the people. We have to say, go out and wait in the hall. We'll help you, but it's going to take a long time. And what you can't understand about the whole numbers thing, if you'd asked me the question that was asked before, if you'd asked me in 2008, should we have 5 judges? I would absolutely said, no, I think probably not. Our numbers tanked around then. I would say not. But that was a function of the economy. But our DV numbers have risen, and so our overall numbers now are probably about the same as they've always been. But what you can't understand is that at 50 or 60 or 70% pre-decree being self-represented, I'm talking about a husband and a wife each filing as their own attorney in a divorce case, with property, with children, with spousal support. We need to know their pension values. We need to know how much their house is worth. We need to know if there was separate property in that house. What did you pay for the house? How much money did you put down? Where did you get that money? They can't answer those questions for us. So we spend hours talking to them, filling out forms for them. Take this list home with you and come back next week or in 4 weeks, and we'll help you with your case. So when you say, are the numbers down? Maybe they are. Is our work up? Absolutely. The other thing that I think you have to understand when we talk about domestic relations court is same-sex marriage. Our numbers are going to be up. And initially, it's going to be a backlog. All the people who couldn't get divorced, who were married in other states and other countries, who are here in Ohio, are coming in right now to get divorced. And as time goes on, all of those same-sex marriages, I don't know what their failure rate's going to be, but there's going to be a failure rate. And they have custody fights, and their custody fights are very complicated because the law has not caught up with how you can create a family in a same-sex marriage. So if people did in vitro fertilization, or if one of the parents gave birth to the child, or had used their genetic component to create that child, the other parent may not be legally the parent. So we don't have law that even makes sense for us. So every one of these cases is going to be a struggle, because one parent's going to say, I'm the parent. I fed this child. I took them to school. And the other parent's going to say, well, genetically, I'm the parent, and that other parent isn't a parent, and they shouldn't be part of this child's life. So you see that those are going to be very contentious cases. So these are the things I want to talk to you about. I've asked for technology. I've got to tell you this. In 1995, a man named Mr. Popovich sued the Domestic Relations Court. He was losing a domestic violence hearing, and in the middle of it, he made a claim that he was not hearing the proceedings adequately. He was tested, and he did have some hearing loss, so the proceedings were stopped, and they got equipment, and then they went forward with a different judge, a different magistrate. It was very complicated. After that all happened, he sued the county, and he won. And there was a judgment of $450,000. That case was appealed. We lost. I put the site in here for you. Our courtrooms, if you've ever been in them, the ceiling's 25, 30 feet high. If I whisper on the bench, the person in the last row can hear me, but the person 4 feet in front of me can't. It's the worst acoustics ever. The judges have been having trouble. The judges are having trouble hearing, the lawyers are having trouble hearing, and the litigants are having trouble hearing. We would like a sound system. We did a bunch of bids. The one that we put in here is the same system, that the same people that bid on your system. We don't want a fancy thing. They talked about padding the walls. We don't want to pad the walls. This is a historic building, but we would at least like speakers like this for the judge, for the witness, for the two lawyers. We'd like to be able to hear each other when we're talking. That's an access to justice issue. And this is a lawsuit waiting to happen, a federal lawsuit. And you're on notice now that this happened once, this happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and no one has corrected it. No one has done anything about it. We don't have sound equipment in our courthouse for people who are hearing impaired. $450 is more that the county paid to this person 20 years ago is almost twice as much as what we're asking to fix this problem just in our courtrooms. I think in the magistrates' rooms, they're smaller, it's less of an issue. But, the courtrooms for sure need this. And we have 6 courtrooms. The other thing we need is, again, getting back to our staff. Through attrition and then through the buyout, we lost basically a third of our staff, more than a third, almost half really, because about 3 years before the buyout, we had about 125 people. After the buyout, we had 62. So we lost about half. We haven't had a personnel director since, somewhere around, 2005. We have employment issues. We have things that we need a lawyer, somebody with some legal training or some HR training to do. When we have new employees, we have to onboard them. When they get terminated, we have to make sure we comply with the law. There's a whole lot of things that go on in between. So what happens here is that the court administrator and I are doing that as double duty. It's not right. It's not appropriate. We need some funding to have some more people in our administration to make it professional, to do what's right. Compare our court to any other court in this county and look at what we have for administration and how many people we have. we have less than anybody does. We need at least 2 more positions at the top. I don't think these are, these are extravagant. Franklin County, as a model, has a director of legal services, somebody who is in charge of the legal side of the court. We would like that. We would like a human resources person to help with our employees. I think those are fairly, they're not ridiculous asks, but it's in here. So that's all in here. The last thing I want to leave you with is the language barriers. Again, I've mentioned it. Our contract with interpreter services for 2015 was $14,000. By August, we had spent $22,000, over $22,000. We're probably going to spend somewhere like $34,000 on this year. I can't see that it's going to get any less next year. It's only going to grow. Our mediator, we've come to the point where we need 2 full-time mediators. Our contract right now is 134. We need it to be 174. If that trend increases, it could be over 200. So I've put those numbers in here on our ask page. I just want you to understand this stuff's not unreasonable. I'm not even asking, I think we should get it, but I'm not asking for that equity $1 million that I think we deserve. I'm not asking for you to give me capital improvements that we need because there's not a lot of things here. I'm asking for some minimal ones for security like keypads and cameras, but I'm not even asking to remodel our whole building or fix the roof or even fix the hole in my courtroom, which is huge. And the Chief Justice visited us yesterday, and we had a meeting with the judges and the magistrates in my courtroom, and she came by the way, to commend us because our numbers are so good. They're probably one of the best in the state. We have about 2% over guideline overall, an overall caseload. And they don't even expect us to have less than 5%. So we're really, really doing well. And she came to thank us and tell us what a great job we were doing. And in the middle of her speech, she looked at the ceiling and she said, "My God, what's the matter with your ceiling?" And I said, "Well, we're waiting for the plasterer to fix that." It's an embarrassment. It's a beautiful building. It's historic, and it's falling apart. So I'm not even asking for some of the things that we need. We have there was a security from the Supreme Court, security group came in, they do an audit, and they gave us a list of all kinds of things that we need. We need that stuff. Mostly we need more sheriffs and we need cameras. I've put some of this in here, but I'm saying I put it at like 27,000. I'm putting it at the lowest possible amount to fix some of the very, egregious security things. So when you get to my last page, your eyes are gonna pop out. I'm saying $1.3 million next year on top of our budget, and about $500,000, almost $600,000 the next year. The executives put in about 8.6 for our budget. If we get that amount and we get nothing more, we'll be in the hole next year by a couple $100,000. What we really need is 9 plus these extras. That's what we need. We need probably 10.3 million. But if you see, a lot of these things are one-time deals. We're not going to buy a sound system again. We're not going to build out the 2 new courtrooms again. We're not going to have to keep buying recording systems. But these are all things that are required by law that we have. Our magistrates have to record their hearings. This stuff it's not huge. It's simple things that we have been denied up until now. And I know some of you have been here. I've asked for some of this before. We asked for a lot of things the last time that we didn't get. I just think you need to understand that I understand the county has problems, or the executive thinks the county has problems. I'm not sure which, because I believe there's some dispute about that. I don't want to be part of that dispute. All I want to say to you is that when you get to the bottom line here, the court is mandated to do things, and the lawsuits are going to come to us. Nobody's going to file a lawsuit because you didn't give something extra to somebody in social services. I'm not saying I want social services cut. I hope you could fund the social services. But these things are mandated by law. This is required. We're a court. This is about access to justice and due process that we cannot do. It's about simple things that are not a lot to ask for in a county that's this big, when we have budgets that are as big as they are everywhere else. And you heard juvenile courts say, if you're going to take money away from them, give it to us. That's what the other 2 courts have said too. It's outrageous that the other courts have to keep bailing us out and coming in because our court is underfunded and understaffed. So I'm sorry, I'm not yelling at you, just really loud. I'm Greek, it's how we are. Do you have any questions?
Well, thank you, Judge. Let me just ask a question here. So I'm trying to understand what your ask is on top of the budget. So the executive's recommended budget for 16, I'm just going to round as 8.7 and 8.8 and 17. So you're
Right.
asking for the 1.3 on top of the 8.
Yes.
8.6.
And the truth is that the 8.6 is going to put us probably in the hole a couple $100,000.
Well, that's what I'm trying to ask.
Right.
then
So what I'm really saying is 9 plus the 1.3. So 10.3 is what we really need next year. And probably, I didn't do the second year, 10 million the next year, because we're not going to need some of the extra stuff that we asked for next year. So the second year we don't need the extra, we're not going to need to redo the sound, all the sound stuff. That's about $500,000, maybe $400,000.
So then I take it that the budget that is submitted is not a budget that you agree with.
No, but it's better than they said to me originally. So I kind of being nice. I don't want to be too rude about it. They didn't cut us.
And did you present this, the 1.3 and the 600,000, did you present that list to the administration?
Yes, they had a variation of this with the I believe the numbers were attached. If not, they were interspersed in there.
Okay, great. Ms. Conwell has requested to speak. Anyone else?
Sure.
Mr. Miller?
Through the chair to Judge Palos, just a couple questions to go back to the cultural challenges that you're dealing with. The cultural challenges that have occurred in the courts, when did it start? Because this is I don't remember, it must have started in the process of our last budget cycle, because I don't really remember these conversations.
I think that it's sort of starting to be the driving force in the last 2 years. As I said, just using the interpreter contract as an example. And that's if you are having a full hearing, you need that interpreter. When we have an uncontested hearing, the Supreme Court is providing a free call-in service with 96 languages. So if we just have somebody who's just getting divorced, and they're just going to say they're, the simple uncontested divorce, we can use that phone number and we can call in and we can get somebody pretty quickly and use them for free. So this is when we're actually having a contested hearing, or if we have like a domestic violence case where they need help with the petition, then we need to actually have a body in the room. And a lot of times, assuming that this kind of makes sense, if one of the parties is foreign language, their spouse often is too. So you can't have the same interpreter for both parties. So you end up with 2 interpreters in the room, one for each, one for the husband, one for the wife. And, think about this. If they're having a custody fight, they have to go to family evaluation services, and one of our evaluators spends probably 10 to 16 hours with them. So the interpreter would have to be there. If they go to mediation, the interpreter would have to be there. So, it's just a sort of little microcosm. And culturally, we just have a big influx of immigrants, I believe, in this county. And the issues, as I said, in a lot of countries, the marriage is not a civil marriage, it's a religious marriage. And then in order to get a visa, they have to have a civil marriage. So then you have 2 marriage dates. So now we fight on almost every one of these cases. Which date is the right day for the marriage? Because it matters as to the marital property. So, this stuff snowballs, and it's hard to explain it unless you're there doing it. But it's a huge barrier. And explaining to everybody that yes, you pay spousal support, and yes, you go through this process, and yes, the gift that to the 2 of you at your wedding is a marital gift, and you have to divide it instead of one person taking it. Although most of those are stolen in the process, apparently, at least in a couple of my cases. Anyway. It's just very difficult. And so we have this issue between, the language and the culture it's very, very difficult right now. And we need to be aware of it. We need to be culturally sensitive, and we need to be proactive.
Who was made aware of these challenges at the county when you started noticing them over here, I guess, on the administration side?
Well, I've talked to the people at OBM about it every quarter. And again, that's one of the reasons that they recommended that we not be cut, because they understand what we're dealing with and how difficult it is.
So you don't know if OBM floated that information when you first made them aware to the administration?
Well, I think they asked, I think they put in other considerations. It may be in here. They put some of the things in here in other considerations. I'm not sure, what they made anybody aware of.
Has there been a dollar amount put on these challenges?
No,
Is it
I don't think there
OPM?
can be. The contract for the interpreter.
We're needing another interpreter.
Right.
And
a lot of courts, Franklin County is having a problem right now, and I understand that a lawsuit has been filed, and I may be wrong that it hasn't been filed, it's maybe been threatened, but I believe it's been filed by somebody requesting that there be an on-site interpreter full-time in the courthouse. Now, I think that's a pretty frightening thought, and the Supreme Court has gotten involved to try to negotiate and back that case down, because if that becomes a court order, think about that. Somebody full-time who speaks another language. And, you have, in Franklin, they have a huge Somali population. Here we have probably our largest is Hispanic, so we'd have somebody speaking Spanish, but we have an awful lot of Eastern Europeans and a lot of Middle Easterners. So how many interpreters are we going to have? It's just difficult. It just makes everything difficult. And going through these cases when you have an interpreter, it triples the time, because you say it, then the interpreter interprets it, then the person asks the interpreter questions, and then they answer, and the interpreter tells you the answer. So, I'm not saying every one of our cases is like that, but a lot of them are, and it's slow and it's difficult. And so when you talk about are we right-sized? Well, when you get in the room with people who either are illiterate or speak a different language, the process is very slow, and you have to treat them with the same respect, and you have to give them as much time as they need. And, there's a saying in mediation and in law that you can only move as fast as the slowest person. So that's kind of where we are. We move with those people, trying to educate them about what it is we expect and about how the process is going to go.
Judge, can I continue my questioning?
Sure.
Can the court speed up the process for domestic violence cases? You mentioned it's currently taking 7 to 14 days. What would it take to speed those up?
The ex parte happens the same day in about 3 hours. By statute, the full hearing has to happen in either 7 or 10 business days, depending on the relationship of the petitioner, whether a child is involved and whether they're living in the same house. There's a couple rules about that. So that's by law. So the problem with it is that at that point, the other side, the respondent, needs to be served. So what we've done is we've sped up the service issue. We've been working very closely with the Sheriff's Department. We're providing them an information sheet now where they can find the respondent, what kind of car it is, where they can, where do they hang out, who do they visit, where are they at certain hours of the day, so that they can get service on them. We've also worked together with the sheriff to train some of the sheriffs to do service inside the courthouse. So if the person shows up to say, I didn't get served, but I got a notice that says there's a hearing here, the sheriff can run over and serve them, so we can capture that. So we're trying to plug all of these holes to make this process as safe as it possibly can be. Even having said that, we have a consultant who said that we should have escorts for all of the people coming and going from the building into their car. We have the ability to call somebody to do that, but it's not always convenient. It's not always possible, and our building has less deputies than we need, and that's another topic I could spend an hour on. And I know you all want to go home sometime this weekend. So,
What happens to the individuals that don't complete the court process in domestic violence? I'm hearing from the other side when I have my domestic violence series that sometimes the women, for whatever reasons, whether the court takes too long, they have to run for safety, they've started the process, but they have to wait the 7 to 10 days. Many of them don't come back, and then they become the ones that are prosecuted.
Well, that's criminal. This is a civil case. Okay. We're not doing that. That's a different story, and I would think that's a harsh and wrong result in criminal.
Not in the domestic violence?
No.
Okay.
We do. This is a civil court, and we only do the civil protection orders, which last for 5 years. A criminal protection order only lasts during the time that the person is charged or until there's a civil order. So if somebody doesn't show up, we don't prosecute them. We don't. But that's one of the reasons we have the advocates, to help the people through the process and to give them safety planning. A lot of times people will come 2 or 3 times to get the paperwork, learn about the process, do some safety planning with the advocates, go home and hide the guns or take the guns to a safe place, get the garage door opener, do things, and then come back and file.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, Judge, thank you. First, thank you very much for your presentation. It's just there's a whole different world out there if you're not a part of it, and you painted a picture which was very helpful to me in getting a better understanding of what you're having to deal with.
Thank you.
And my first question, and don't take this the wrong way, I'm not meaning to be critical, but I just want to get a better understanding of what's going on in the budget. For 2015, you were budgeted for $8,120,000, and the current projection is $8,630,000, a variance of $510,000. Can you explain what that $510,000 consists of? What areas were your expenses required more than what was in the 2015 budget?
Some of that is an additional staff. We were required to hire somebody in FES to help with the intake. One of the things that came out of some domestic violence training that we had was that it's important that all intake be done in person, that somebody not just be handed a form and sent out in the hall to fill it out. So we have a person who literally sits down with both of the parents when they're going to the custody evaluation and asks them the questions about domestic violence as well as other things. And so that's part of it. I have it in my notes. And Jim, do you know the answer?
Judge, FES, we don't, everybody
I'm sorry.
doesn't know what that
Family
is.
Evaluation Services are our court internal custody evaluators. So when it's a contentious case, and what's really a contentious case now is, sadly, one of the parents is drug addicted or mentally ill or has other substance abuse issues. And so there's a refusal to do shared parenting or an inability to do parenting or even transportation. What's the 500 difference?
178,000, I believe, is close to the 27th pay issue, and the 160,000 plus for additional magistrates for our new judge.
So that's the difference between last year and this year, or the difference between where we were and where we are.
Okay, so then the administration budget gave you a 2016 budget, a base budget of $8,222,000, which is less than you're going to spend in 2015 by $400,000,
Probably.
although it's listed as an increase of $102,000 because it's more than what was budgeted in 2015. And then it says that there is an increase of $459,000 to cover increased personnel needs.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, what are the increased personnel that was provided for there, and is any of that the same as what's in your 1.3 list, or are they different?
They're different. Again, this becomes very difficult every time we go.
That's what I thought.
Sure. Those are people that we have put on this year. It also represents a 2% raise that everyone else got, but we took it, we gave it to our people because everyone else was getting it. And every time there's a raise, it was, I don't want to get into the middle of this whole issue, but to say that the courts can give a raise if they have it in their budget and then not to budget for it is disingenuous. And so we went ahead and gave the raise, understanding that at some point, if we needed to, one of the other courts would back up that money if we needed to get it from someplace else. And OBM has assured us. It's very difficult. What happens here is that we meet quarterly, and every time we come sit down, it's like, well, we need X, Y, Z. And then the question is, do we take it to the executive or do we take it to council? And if it's this year, it's kind of coming in the middle of the year to ask for money. So we didn't do it. OBM said they could cover that. And so that's what this represents. We needed a new law clerk. We needed a new person in FES. The new judge hired 2 new magistrates. So that's not all of it. There's, because that's more than what this number is. So we had other money for some of that.
FES is what?
Our court evaluators. They do the custody evaluations for the more contentious cases, and their workload has pretty much exploded because An outside evaluation is in the neighborhood of $8,000 to $15,000, so most people can't afford that. We charge them $600.
So basically, the 459,000 is to take the people that you had to hire during the year in 2015 and
Right.
carry those people
Correct.
over into 2016.
That's a big piece of it, yes.
So it just maintains the status quo.
Right.
And so, but you didn't hire most of these people until somewhere in the middle of the
Right.
year.
Correct.
And so that explains why, if you're spending $8,630,000 in 2015, well, approximately the same amount is not going to get you.
Correct.
So what you're saying is that you're actually going to need $9 million just to do
Round
what
numbers. Yes.
just to do what.
Yes,
what
just to tread water.
Okay.
No extras, no raises probably.
Okay, so that gives me a sense
Okay,
of where
good.
you're at and where you want to go.
All
So
right.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions? No other questions? Mr. Gallagher?
Judge, thanks for being here. I married a Greek.
My pleasure.
So you're I'm used to you. Looking at the numbers, I mean, your court, and I don't have probates numbers or juveniles, but I mean, you guys get them in and get them out. So what the Chief Justice is saying is, it shows. I mean, it shows that work's going on there, and I certainly appreciate that. Again, we have difficult budget times.
I get it.
We're going to do the best we can with what little we have, and that's all I can promise you. You know, the only thing is, I was looking at the HR thing here. Did you ever look at coming over to our HR?
Well, we've thought about it, but I think the job would be more, I really need somebody on site because we have issues, with payroll. There's a lot of things that go on that what we've done is we've parsed out the jobs to different people. And I think it would just be easier if we had one person who could deal with the employee complaints, deal with manage the performance reviews, interviews. For example, when we go to interview somebody, we do it the same way the county does. We do a team of 3. And sometimes, to pull people out of their regular jobs and to drag them in for these interviews and to spend a lot of time on it, it's very difficult. So if we had an HR person, that person would always be at all the interviews, and then we could pull in the other 2 people as we needed versus, always having one person. I was having to pull 3 people off docket or out of their department. So there's a lot of duties that I think would be inherent in this. And we have a lot of staff that they have questions. And right now they go to their supervisors, but the supervisors don't necessarily have all the training they need to give them the right answers.
Might be something you might want to at least discuss
We'll look
with
at
the
it.
administration. I don't know if it would work, but at least it's an opportunity to look
Well,
at
we're
that.
always looking for opportunities to make things better. We actually made a suggestion to the clerk yesterday, the day before, that we partner the clerk and CISA and the court and collect child support payments at our clerk's office in our building. And that would be a win-win because they can get some 4D money for their cashier person. So we're going to work on that. Anything we can do to bring money in and to make this more efficient, we're there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any further questions? Hearing none, Judge, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you could please.
Have a nice weekend, everyone. Thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could please leave your opening remarks with the clerk. Next up is probate court. Judge Russo.
Good afternoon, Council President Brady, members of council, and members of the staff. I'm worn out after listening to Judge Palos. But I can tell you this, I spent 18 years before my present position. I spent 18 years in domestic relations court as a judge, and everything she's saying is true. So while the courts present here today stand together, united as one, in our request for funding, as you've heard previously from the other judges, we are in fact quite separate entities with distinct and divergent duties and responsibilities. For example, in the probate court, I'm the presiding judge, I'm the administrative judge, and I'm also the clerk of courts. Judge John Russo is the presiding and administrative judge, but he's not the clerk of courts. Judge Palos and Judge Sweeney are administrative judges of their courts. Judge Sweeney is also her own clerk of courts, and she also runs her own detention facility. Each of our courts also, by definition, handles different types of matters. For example, common pleas and juvenile court handle criminal matters, while domestic and probate do not. Because of the different types of cases handled by each court and the different responsibilities of each court, we all have separate and distinct funding challenges. Simply put, because probate court has no criminal matters, which do not generate significant funds for the county, and because we're our own clerk of courts, we're in the best position to control the amount of fees we're able to generate to the county general fund and also for our own court. The common pleas court, on the other hand, not being their own clerk and handling a significant amount of criminal cases, does not enjoy that same flexibility. So asking all of the courts to cut their budget in the same percentage is, in my opinion, unrealistic because all of the courts are not, in fact, the same. Furthermore, we're not county departments that can cut discretionary programs and services, and therefore we shouldn't be treated as such. We're independent courts that have a legal obligation to serve the public and provide services to the public. These services are mandatory, they're not discretionary. They cannot be cut sometimes without dramatically affecting the public's right to have access to the courts, as you've heard from the previous judges. That's why we are all completely and fully supporting each of the other courts' budget requests. Just because one court is able to adjust its budget in order to meet the county's requested cuts does not necessarily mean that the other courts can do that. They have different responsibilities. Different courts equals different responsibilities equals different budgets. We're asking that you fund each court according to the budget requested by that particular court and not by an overall budget cut. I think I speak for the courts when I say that we all make every effort to cooperate with the county government regarding our budgets, but across-the-board budget cuts is neither reasonable nor attainable in light of the court's statutory obligations and current circumstances. In a nutshell, I completely and fully support the full funding for the other three courts. Furthermore, any adjustments that we make in our budget that save the county money, we would request that money be used for one of two purposes. One, either to be transferred to the domestic relations court for their budget, or for the purposes of security in our building, which we share with the domestic relations court. Now, I've been in this building a couple times, and I've been on 3 floors, the first floor, this floor, and the county executive's floor. And every floor has more than one deputy. In our courthouse, the second and third floor, and the second floor, which I'm on, there's 14 judges. On the third floor, there's 5 judges. And there is not a deputy assigned to the second floor, and there's not a deputy assigned to the third floor. So this building has better security than our building has. And that's really, and we've had a security person come in from the Supreme Court that has pointed this out to us, among many other security issues. But just not having a deputy on the floor when there's judges there, and that doesn't even count the magistrates. There's numerous magistrates on each of those floors as well. So it really cries out for a deputy to be on the second floor and a deputy to be assigned on the third floor. Specifically regarding the probate court, I'm just going to give you a quick, short bullet point presentation. Our budget's approximately $6 million. We have 75 employees. We have 13,000 cases filed. Our numbers actually go up as the population ages. There's more guardianships. There's more estates. So our numbers are actually going up. We handle estates, guardianships, adoptions, psychiatric commitments, wrongful death settlements, will and trust adversary cases, and land sales. In terms of marriage licenses, we issue about 8,000 marriage licenses this year. You can register online for that. We have an arrangement with 4 suburban courts that you can actually go to a suburban court on a Friday and obtain your marriage license at that court. Now, we've done that through no cost either to our court or to the county. We use an existing person. The court charges us no rent, so we've accommodated the public through no cost to the county or to our court. We also do marriage ceremonies. Before I became the administrative judge, the probate court did not perform marriage ceremonies. Over the past few years, we've performed over 1,000 marriages, which brought in close to over $75,000 in additional fees to the county. Our online docket, 95% of all the pleadings and judgment entries in our court, you can go to our website as a member of the public and look at anything that's been filed in our court, including pleadings and judgment entries. Mediation, we've expanded our mediation and we have approximately a 90% success rate. Same-sex marriage, within 1 hour of the Supreme Court ruling on legalizing same-sex marriage, we issued a same-sex marriage license and we were likely the first court in Ohio to perform a same-sex marriage ceremony. E-filing, next month we begin our e-filing for name changes. Next year, we expect to add several other case categories to the e-filing, and by the end of this year, we will be sending out all of our court notices by email. We're able to meet the requested restrictions suggested by the administration as a result of generating more fees. We actually are not in a position to cut personnel or to cut services, but we can generate additional fees, and we have some other monies that we can transfer. So we're able to comply with that. Again, we ask though that any savings that our court makes would either be appropriated to the domestic relations court and or for court security for domestic relations court in our court. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. I'll ask the same question that I asked earlier. So do you agree with this budget that's been presented by the administration?
With the caveat that the savings go to the domestic relations court and or to the court security in our building, yes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Brown?
You mentioned that there were municipalities within the county that could get marriage licenses.
Yes, that's true.
You said there are 8 of them. Do you know which
No,
one?
there's 4 of them. It's Berea Court, Garfield Court, Shaker Heights, and Rocky River.
And how were those determined?
We tried to get them in the various, one on the east side, west side, and the south side. We just tried to, that the courts had to be willing to cooperate and let us have room for us to place a person in their court and provide them with the space to operate.
Okay, thank you.
And we're looking to expand that this coming year to a couple other courts.
Okay, Ms. Conwell.
The chair to Judge Anthony, I just want to ask a question in regards to one of the procedures, name changes. So how long roughly does it take for an individual to get a name change? And I guess
I think it takes about 6 to 8 weeks because it has to be.
Because there's a requirement for publication.
There's a publication requirement that I believe is 4 weeks. So then by the time the publication is done, it has to be set for hearing. I think it's about 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay, so I could reach out to you. I think this one particular case I'm dealing with is taking a little longer, and I'm just wondering why for a senior. Can I reach out to your office? Yes, you can.
I'll be glad to check that out for you. Now, there's always exceptions. Someone could have objected, to the name change, which is very unusual, but it's a possibility. But yes, I'd be glad to check that out for you.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, Judge, I'm just going to ask one question that's sort of like what I've been asking all afternoon. There's an item here that it says that the budget shifts $140,000 in information technology payroll expenses from the general fund to the computerization fund and moves $41,000 in GF expenses to the dispute resolution fund.
We're able to do that on a yearly basis, so that would not be a one-time transfer.
Okay, thank you.
We're in a position to continue that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No, Judge, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for
If
your
you
time.
If you could please leave your opening remarks with the clerk. Next up is Public Works, but before we do that, as we did yesterday around this time, we could take a 5-minute recess and be back at 3:15.